I said there was another place that the four layers tied into, and it's something we didn't talk about with kinfolk, which is what are the decisions one makes in any way through the course of character creation. And one thing that has really struck me is that if you have the same decision being made over and over for this aspect of the character, and then you go to the next aspect of character, make the decision again, after a little bit you hit a kind of cognitive exhaustion. And let's just take two very, very opposite examples. One example would be to roll and see what you get. And that's one way of making a decision. Another way of making a decision is to have a certain amount of points you spend on effectiveness, and then you make up what it is entirely out of whole cloth. Yet another would be to have a list of terms and you choose one. Now, like it or not, no one's going to make every decision about everything about a character wham simultaneously.
Right.
This is going to be a linear process. There are going to be steps. The question is, what is the order of those steps? Furthermore, which cognitive acts are put in place prior to each step? Because changing up the methodology is actually often very powerful. What game was it that I was just poring over that was a really good example of... Hold on just a minute. I was just thinking about this in detail. It was a game where you chose stuff. You chose everything. You chose the concept of the character. You chose the ethnicity of the character, whatever that was for this game. God, I don't know why it's just completely washing right over my head. You chose what they had. You chose their name. You chose everything. And I remember I'm making up a character for this, and I just wore out. By the time I got to the point where you chose the character's anxieties, there are the things that... Oh, right, I remember. This is in the game 44 by Matt Snyder that I'm going to be recommending to you in just a minute for another reason. And I recall that I felt character creation fatigue very badly, and you would say, well, why on earth, Ron? There's like 5 or 6 steps, and you're just choosing each time. It's the easiest thing in the world, right? And yet, I was completely worn out. There was nothing that I was doing through the course of play that gave me bounce back that I then had to adapt to. And so... I found that I was ready to play halfway through that process, and by the time I was done with the process, I wasn't really very interested in playing. And I thought about it, and it was because the steps were exactly the same cognitive act all the way through. To reverse this, there is a game called Legendary Lives, one of the very best fantasy heartbreakers, actually. And it's available free online. And if you do its character creation, a friend of mine once called it no-fault character creation. First thing you do, you roll for the character's race. Second thing you do, you roll for each of the attributes. Third thing, you roll for social background, you roll for height and weight, you roll for this, you roll for that, you roll. And you're getting a really freaking amazing set of data out of this. And then you choose the character class. And in this game, character class is very much at level 2. It's definitely not. It's very specific. Level is not, the class in this game is not what anybody calls the character. The character may call themselves a bodyguard, a merc, a this or that. They might call themselves a painter. But their class is warrior. They don't know what their class is.
Right.
And so that is, that's kind of, I think, an important point about the game. But you pick that. And it's true that once that you're informed on your decision, first of all, by the attributes, because various attributes are best for various classes. But there's a lot of play in that. And the different races set up profiles for what they're very different profiles for the different classes. So there's a lot of races. So you're going to end up hitting the choice about class from different angles based on what race you got. And then as a function of that, the attribute rolls you did. You see what I mean? But it's your choice that's informed by those. You've shifted into a different cognitive mode when you hit that step. And it's interesting in this game because so much of it is random relative to what's typically chosen in a fantasy role-playing game.
Right.
The other choice you have, and it's the only other choice in role-playing, in character creation for this game. Because, I mean, you roll for what your character values. You roll for their favorite object. You roll for everything. Everything. It's insane.
Right.
And then you roll for 5 life events. And each one, a lot of them have sub-rolls. Okay, you have a lover. You roll to see whether the lover is dead, whether you live with the lover, whether you have kids, etc. Right? So you've done all this. But it's your choice to put those life events in any order you want. And to specify the actual content yourself. And after all that rolling and picking the class yourself, by that point, it's amazing how incredibly intuitive that final choice is. And you have really made a decision about whether your character is currently a fugitive on the run or had a brush with the law a long time ago and everybody's forgotten about it.
Right.
And it's a big deal. For a game where you make at least 40 separate rolls to make up a character.
Right.
The amount of creative investment in the character when you're done, and it's very much your guy at that point, is immense. And I've seen people get very energized to play when they make up their characters. And it's because where you make the choice, where you're originally creative, and where you get sort of the game made me do it, and how those are integrated with one another in a specific linear process is extremely well done. And I maintain that principle matters even if you have 2 steps in character creation. That there's a procedure. Now, it's tricky if you look at Sorcerer because I specifically say of the 10 steps I list, they can be done in any order. And I maintain that's true. But you will notice that they vary greatly in the cognitive act involved. And so therefore, whatever order you put them in, you're going to get that change-up effect over and over.
Right.
So I think that's actually a really valuable thing to consider. It's its own, remember I keep talking about bounce, it's its own form of bounce in terms of prep.
Would you say points and deciding from terms is essentially the same act and mixing those two up?
If you look, remember when I talked about the structure of a game, about what was fixed and what was chosen and what was this and that? Oh, wait, let me see if okay. Let's say that we have a list of homelands. And there aren't any other homelands to pick from. It's part of a step of character creation that your guy is going to be from one of these homelands. In one game, you might roll. In another game, you might pick. So it's the same step insofar as you are working off a fixed list. And it's the same step in terms of how Homeland relates to what has come before and what will be determined next. But it's not quite the same because the one you're rolling to find it, and in the other you're choosing which one. So there's different degrees of things to think about for each step. One is what it is. Another is whether it's a list or not, or whether it's something you make up a homeland for the character. Right. Or another one is how you actually arrive at that amount. So if you spend points, a designated amount of points across your standard 6 attributes, and in another game you roll for them, they are different cognitively in terms of roll versus choose. They're the same in terms of arriving at attributes within a fixed range. What I'm saying is that if, very crudely, and I don't know if it is even this crude, if you roll at step 1, choose at step 2. If you choose at step 2, roll at step 3. Again, that's probably way too crude, but something like that is worth considering.
Okay.
So, do you see how both of those things, the social contract issues and then this business about how you arrive at your character, both of those are deeply informed by the understanding of those 4 layers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a wad of thinking material that isn't trivial, I think.